Welcome, everybody, back to the Owl Nest. We finally did it. We made it through the off season. We made it. We're here. Week 1 has finally happened. It's been too long. We finally get Overwatch League. It was great.
Yeah, it was
Good.
awesome.
Overwatch 2 League, I think, is what it's called now. They didn't update the name of the league, but it is now Overwatch 2 Beta League. It's no longer Overwatch League. But we finally got week 1, and it existed. That was the thing that happened, right?
It was so freaking hype. So good. I am in a really good mood today.
All right. So it was nice seeing the league back, but I mean, it was also nice to see just it played on Overwatch 2. I thought that it looked and went how I expected it to. I felt like the overall flow of the broadcast and everything went fairly well with 5v5. Even though it's like I'm pretty sure the overall matches like lasted the same amount of time as they did before, but it felt the broadcast felt faster, didn't it?
Yeah, I think part of it was just we had seen so much Overwatch 2. I mean Overwatch 1
Mhm.
that it had gone so long without any sort of big update. Like you'd have occasional meta shifts, but but it was getting a little stale. Uh and I think that Overwatch 2 kind of broke that, and I thought it was awesome. I will say though, the broadcast, especially the first day, it
Uh,
wasn't the cleanest of broadcasts.
Man,
Um,
that day 1 broadcast was a
it was a
little
struggle,
rough.
and at first I totally thought it was just my phone and then my computer, whatever I was looking at
Nope, we all
when I
got
was looking
boomed.
at it. Yeah,
It
that's with
was a
everyone.
full worldwide boomage of the broadcast. But
It was
I mean, it got better as the week went on, but I still feel like it wasn't as polished as it should have been
yeah,
for the broadcast. I mean, and I know that like the production like pipeline is different this year since they like outsourced the actual production of it. So I think it was Avast talked about it a bunch. So it's like the production company that's handling production is in like Toronto, but like the Blizzard, the actual like viewing team for the league like views it and then sends the footage to Toronto to the production company. They do their stuff and then they send it back to Anaheim to the team.
interesting.
So it's like there's a middleman there. And it was very clear the difference. So like when they had the LAN event in San Antonio, that wasn't handled by a third party. It was just there on site. I don't know how much that played into the terrible broadcast production, but it was kind of rough that first day. But it got better as the day went on. But overall, like production value aside, I felt like the broadcast flow was really nice.
Yeah.
Everything kind of flowed really well. And I think that had a lot to do with 5v5 because 5v5 was just innately faster.
Yeah, and I felt like all the in between segments, there was like a new life to it. I feel like the casters seemed a lot more into it. You have a lot of new
Hmm.
casters that did really great. Um, I thought it was really good. I will say some of the spectator cam, some of
Yeah.
the choices were kind of odd, and I think part of it is they're still trying to figure out the best way to broadcast 5v5 because
Hmm.
there are certain maps in certain places where, like, if you're running a Doomfist Lucio, like, there's no way to keep everything on camera if you're following first person views, and so I think it'll be interesting to see how that evolves and if they're able to figure out some of these bugs. And I think the production itself should be a lot better
It
next.
should it should get better. And then the same with the spectator cams because I mean it was just faster. It was a faster paced thing, and but there was also way less visual clutter because there's just one less tank. But then there's not a whole lot of shields outside of Reinhardt or Sigma when they were played. So visually there was less clutter. It was faster, but it did look like chaos sometimes. Some of those
Yeah.
matches just straight up looked like chaos. Even though
Oh
there was like less clutter visually, it was so fast and things were just moving all over the place that it was sometimes a bit difficult to figure out what was going on, especially with some of the spectator cams not being in the place that they should be. But I feel like overall, production quality aside, it was a good introduction to the league for 5v5. I thought it was a very good showing of it, and it's only going to get better as time goes on.
Yeah,
And
I think
even go ahead.
one thing that I thought was kind of a cool thing to see was pros playing push.
Yeah.
I was interested to see how that would play out as compared to some of the other game modes, and especially as a replacement to two CP. Um, I liked push. I thought it was interesting. I think the first couple days of games it seemed very like if you won the first fight, it was kind of over. Um, it was really easy to snowball, but I felt like that kind of they kind of adjusted to it by the end, and I think the third and fourth day we had a few close push maps.
Yeah, I felt like push was still pretty snowbally though. It was like if teams were able to get that first checkpoint, the game was like over. Because
Yeah,
in most circumstances, whichever team got that first point first just basically won because it was really easy for them to hold that momentum. So I think push as a game mode might need some adjustments to how some spawns work and even where the points are located. But I didn't feel like it was a terrible first introduction to the game mode. It
yeah,
felt it felt way more hype to watch rather than what 2CP was, which always just felt like a drag most of the time. But like push in the close matches that happened this week was actually like really fun to watch, and it was very energetic as a game mode, whereas 2CP just always felt like it was a game of stall as opposed to just a bunch of fights happening all over the place. So push definitely played into the chaotic nature of 5v5 that we saw throughout the week, but it was a good just refreshing take on a game mode because 2CP was it way outlived its time. So now we
yeah.
don't have to deal with it.
I know you said that you were wishing that. I mean, you were thinking that they might need to make adjustments, and that was something I think wasn't it Aaron that said in one of the live streams they did like a few weeks ago that they were
Yeah.
looking at potentially adjusting some things, and so we might see some rule changes to push um before the next beta even potentially, but I think for now it's definitely better than 2CP.
Definitely better than 2CP, and overall Overwatch 2 just felt good. It felt fun to watch outside of the production value, which has nothing to do with the game itself. So the game showed a lot of promise, and we saw some heroes that we haven't seen in a while. Soldier 76 is meta, I guess.
Yeah,
When was the last time that was the case? What, 2017?
like that. Yeah,
Like
and
5 years ago?
it's cool. I'm okay with Soldier. I kind of wish it was Sojourn out of the gate.
Yeah, that
As
would have been
opposed
fun
to
to
Soldier.
see, but I would rather see a bunch of soldier than a bunch of like May Reaper and stuff like we had last season.
That's true.
So it was refreshing to see soldier, but then you had a more often than not, you had a Genji running next to him. So you had just two like 2017 heroes. We've got a really weird looking meta with a Lucio backline. And you're like, oh my goodness, we're seeing like real Overwatch being played. It's not just like Orisa Sigma because you can't do that anymore. I felt like
Yeah,
overall we saw. I mean, it was a lot of that 76 Genji, Winston, Lucio, Ana dive, but we saw
yeah,
some Doom played by like Atlanta and by Houston, and some other teams pulled Echo out instead of Genji, like NYXL. And like
hmm
Widow was played on some maps. Sometimes they'd run Brig or BAP in the back. I think we saw every support played, if I remember correctly. Even though
yeah.
it wasn't a whole lot of like Mercy, Mercy was still played.
And then they also we saw some Tracer, which
Yeah.
was cool. And yeah, so there was a good amount of variety. Rhine comps on some maps by
I
some teams on every
by
map.
certain specific teams on every map. But it was fun to see Rhine comps. I didn't think
Yeah,
that Rhine was going to be played a whole lot, but some teams just kind of like went with it and ran with it. And
yeah,
outside of Wrecking Ball being disabled, Orisa was the only tank that we didn't see, right?
yeah,
Because we saw Diva on a select few maps, and Sigma was really played on Circuit Royal along with Widow. Widow was played a lot there as well.
yeah.
So we
I felt
saw
like Sigma got brought out a lot on the Widow maps.
That seems to be what teams were doing. Whereas if Widow was going to be played, they would bring out the Sigma with her outside of like Gibraltar. So it was
Yeah.
fun to see all the different tanks, and we saw some wacky DPS heroes from some teams, especially on Lijiang. We saw some Cassidy, we saw some Junkrat, some Pharah, some Ashe. No, like Torbjorn or anything, unfortunately. We saw Symmetra played, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But it was just fun. It was fun seeing those kind of comps, but it was also fun seeing Genji and Ana specifically because I feel like those are two heroes that have such a high skill ceiling, and we saw some cracked Anas
Oh,
this weekend.
there
Oh
was
my
crazy
goodness.
and I think the best thing about the crazy Ana play this week is we heard so much coming into the beta and coming into the Overwatch League that supports were going to suck. You know, everyone like
Mhm.
you look at support queue times right now, they're ridiculous. And so many people were saying, you know, supports they're just getting power farmed. But I think this week some of the Anas were the most impactful
It
players in the game.
was
I think
crazy.
anytime anyone brought out Doom, if there was an Ana on the other team that was good,
They kind of got hard
that Doom
farmed.
was yeah. And I think sleep is showing itself to be, you know, if you can hit those, it's strongest ability in the game right now
Mhm.
potentially, and anti nade of
Yeah,
course.
it was really nice to see supports not getting farmed like it was hinted at. Like that was, as you said, that was like the storyline all throughout the beta up until this point that supports were getting hard farmed by DPS. But I felt like it was a pretty even balance. There wasn't any role that felt like it was just carrying the game like to an extent that it was just overpowered. It was mainly just if you're good at the hero, you're gonna be good.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's exactly what they've had as the design philosophy for this game, you know, and everything they've said. And
mhm.
I know we're mostly just talking about Overwatch League on this podcast, but I think it shows that the the Overwatch team is making something good here, and
They really are.
yeah, and it's not perfect at this point, but I
Oh
think
no, it's not.
no, but it's getting there.
It is
Um,
definitely getting there.
yeah, and so it's pretty cool to see.
It was fun to see all the different heroes that we had, and we don't know how the meta will advance moving into the future. If Doom will come more in than Winston was, but it was mainly Winston or Doom, with Zarya being played on some of the closer maps. Those were like the three tanks that were played a bunch, and Ryan and Sigma were kind of
And
niche.
some teams were bringing out Diva
On very
occasionally.
few points, Devo is being played, but I feel like it's mostly going to be a lot of those Zarya, Winston, or Doom comps with Lucio
Yeah.
Ana or Lucio Bap, depending on what you're running. But it was just fun to see a bunch of different comps because even if 76 Genji, Winston, Ana, Lucio is like just everybody plays it, I'm okay seeing that comp all the time
Yeah.
because Anas are fun, Genjis are fun. 76 is, we haven't seen him much in the meta in the last couple years, so it's fun to see him back in the meta. So we'll see how things advance into the future. But enough talking about Overwatch 2 in general. Let's actually talk about some of these cracked well,
Oh
I don't
yeah.
even know what happened this week. So let's start with the team that literally just definition branded themselves. The Houston Outlaws decided they wanted to do their Houston Outlaws things and win matches and then proceed to lose matches.
So I said a lot of things going into this week, and I've got to say, after their first match, I was expecting, I was planning, I even told my wife, I was like, okay, I need to get some green face paint because I was going to go all out and just, yeah, Outlaws, you know,
And then they got
they
so
Outlaws
they
themselves.
did the Outlaws thing. Although, side note, the battle for Texas being live in San Antonio, even though we weren't
So great.
there, was so fun to watch on broadcast. And man, is everybody just ready for live events to come back? I feel
Oh,
like
yeah.
that really helped the Outlaws in their game against the Fuel because they just fed. They just fed off the crowd and
Oh, yeah.
then proceeded to just take a massive dump all over the Dallas Fuel.
It was that first match, and going into it because we were watching a lot of the games together. We were talking as we were watching, and you know, going into it, we were talking about how epic of a match it was going to be and how great it would be, and then I think it was me that was like, what if one of the teams 3-0'd the
3-0's the
others?
other.
And you even said If that happens,
Man,
it's the Fuel
yeah.
3-0ing
If it, I
Outlaws. You
genuinely
said there was
thought
no
that.
way Houston did that, and I was like, hey, you never know.
Like, yeah, I was on the Outlaws hopium. I predicted them to win, but it was like if it was gonna be a stomp, it was gonna be the other way. So when the Outlaws came out with the Dawn tank, I don't think anybody expected to see Dante coming out on Doomfist and then do what he did, because the Outlaws came out on the Doomfist and then just pedal to the metal and just speed ran the game. Outside of
Yeah.
Oasis, which was a little close, but all the other maps, they played so aggressive into the Fuel that the Fuel just like mentally were
Yeah, the
confused the whole
Fuel looked
time.
terrible that whole match. The Fuel didn't really have anything that stood out as a redeeming factor. Like after that, I had to seriously pause and think like, why did I put these guys at the top of my list? And then I looked at their names again, and I was like, oh, that's why. But it's like
They got hard
they look so
diffed,
bad.
and I think it was Avast who was saying he talked with Tasmo. I think that was who he said he talked. And Tasmo was one of the head guys of the Fuel organization of Envy, and was talking about how it was just nerves. I mean, the Fuel hadn't. I mean, the Fuel. No teams have really played against a live crowd with the other team in the same room, and so I think the Fuel kind of couldn't adapt and were kind of getting nervous on stage, whereas the Outlaws just kind of took it and ran with it. And
Yeah.
so they really diffed the Fuel. I mean, Iris just didn't let Sparkle play the video game ever. There were some crazy sleep darts, and Pelican just picked
Pelicans
up where
crashed.
he just picked up where he left off
He
from
looked
2021.
he looked so freaking good. Like pretty much the entire time. There were several times that was just like him 1v9ing. Like
It was a very good match for the Outlaws. I did not expect it to be a 3-0. I thought this was a certified banger of the week, and it just turned into a stomping. And we come out of this game, and everyone, myself included, we're all like, oh, this Outlaws team, is this like, oh, number one NA? Like, this is the team we're looking? And then they decided didn't want to they didn't want to do that anymore, and they played against the Defiant and proceeded to just drop the spaghetti. I mean, to be fair, they didn't like get bodied, but after their performance against the Fuel, we all thought that they were gonna just stomp roll the Defiant, and that is not what happened.
Well, and I think the biggest thing about this match was it showed the power of the support, and we had even talked about the Defiant support line going into the season as being a couple really cracked players, and I think they really showed their skill. I think they completely handled the Dante Doom. Doomfist. There were several times I think you even while watching you were like, "What's Dante doing? Like he's feeding,
turbo feeding into the backline at times."
And it looked like it, but looking back, it was a lot of really good sleeps, a lot of really good antes, and Doomfist just wasn't able to do anything, and the Outlaws just weren't able to adapt.
It was they because in the match, I mean, it went to 5 maps, so it wasn't like it was a stomping in Defiant's favor. And so the Outlaws were able to take some maps. I mean, they took Kings Row and they took Midtown as well, correct? Wait, that's not what they played on. No, they took Kings Row and then they took Gibraltar. That was what they took.
Yeah.
And like they were still playing aggro, but it was Twilight was doing a lot more to shut down Dante than the Fuel were. Like it was just they weren't able to do a whole lot. Like Fielder was not having the impact that Twilight ended up having. And so when Dante would go in, he'd get immediately slept. And then the Defiant started playing Tracer, which they hadn't done against the Justice. They started putting Finale on the Tracer to help zone Dante out a little bit, and then the Outlaws just couldn't do enough to make it not be effective. Because I mean, I wouldn't say Finale is like a god tier Tracer. He's like okay at Tracer, but when he's set up so well by Twilight and Muse played out of his mind on the Winston, that the Outlaws got kind of countercomped. And the problem is, as good as they may be at when they're clicking, I mean, when you're running Dante as your tank, you're locked into it. You have zero flexibility whatsoever. If the Doomfist isn't working, you can't swap, and so they were just hard locked into the Doomfist comp.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting thought to wonder what it would have looked like if they would have swapped Dante out at some point and put Piggy in. Um,
Yeah, I,
like
I I think the thing with Piggy though is that he's only he's an off tank player, and I think you'd probably rather have the Doomfist than an off tank. But the problem is that I think moving forward, I don't think one tricking Doomfist all the time is gonna cut it. At times, you're gonna want the Winston,
yeah,
and
and
so
I think they have to have someone to play
I
Winston, and
imagine that
whether
they're either having Piggy learn it or there's a plan to sign someone else. Like I think the Dante Doomfist I think is a good short term solution for right now while Piggy's trying to learn how to play some main tanks. But you're not going to be able to run Doomfist all the time. In fact, by the end of the kickoff clash, it may not work anymore all the time.
well, I think the fact that they lost to Toronto Defiant and it was kind of I'm not saying it's Dante's fault, but I think he definitely didn't help in that match to the degree that he needed to.
Yeah.
I think it shows that they need to figure something out.
I hope that they have a plan. I mean, and Jake and Junkbuck probably do. There's no way that they don't have plans for the future. Like they definitely do. But the Outlaws do need to try and find a second strategy so that when the Doomfist stops working, or even when the Echo stops working, they maybe go Tracer with Pelican. I trust them to figure it out moving into future weeks. But I mean, next week they play the Shock, so I mean, it's not like they're getting an easy go of things. They need to quickly turn things around because a team like the Shock may be able to punish. If Toronto is able to punish it, I'm pretty sure Proper is going to be able to do the same thing.
Oh yeah.
So I'm worried about the Outlaws moving forward, but I think that they showed way more strength than we thought they would. But
Yeah.
then the team on the receiving end of that butt whooping, are Dallas good or are Dallas bad? What's your takeaway of the Fuel?
It's hard to say. I guess I've got to say my favorite moment of the Dallas Houston match. We were watching, and it was Dorado, and I had to leave in the middle of the match, but you had the Fuel running Genji, and they had Nano Blade ready, and you were like, Houston doesn't have anything to counter the Genji. There's nothing. And I was like, they've got Ana. They've got the sleep. And then I had to leave. And apparently, right after I left, Genji Blade
Sleep.
instantly slept. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I think, was it that the Fuel played that bad? That first match? Kind of.
They beefed. That was
Like, I don't think there's
not.
anything by it.
Yeah. The thing is that I don't know. The Fuel came out just flat, completely dead against the Outlaws. But then when they moved against the Justice, it was not. That was not the case.
And that's what I was going to say. I think they still didn't look like super clean against the Justice, but they're working up to it. They 3-0'd the Justice, which I mean, it's the Justice don't look amazing right now, but 3-0ing any team is significant in my book, and I think the thing is Dallas is, I think end of this split, I mean end of this tournament cycle, they're going to be a top 4 team still.
Yeah, and the thing with the Dallas Justice with the Dallas Washington match is that it wasn't Dallas, like they weren't playing as the Dallas that we thought they would. But what was more interesting is that majority of the match outside of Li Zhang, they didn't really play the Winston Genji comp. I mean, they were running Reaper Zarya, which was weird because coming into the week coming into those first couple matches, it seemed like Dallas. I mean, that's a Dallas wet dream meta. Are you kidding me? Sparkle Genji, and you're able to play Fearless Winston with Fielder on like. They couldn't ask for a better meta, but then they didn't play the Winston Genji all the time. They played a lot of Hanbin Zarya, and then they pulled out the Reaper a bunch on Route 66 and on Eichenwald. So they beat Justice 3-0, but it wasn't with the comps that we thought they would be running. And
Yeah.
I mean, and they looked great, but these pseudo rush comps that they were running with the Reaper Zarya relied heavily on ults. It was like, okay, we're gonna build up a Nano Blade or we're gonna build up a Death Blossom, bubble them and then hope we win the fight. So it was like
Mhm.
kind of just a lot of sitting around hoping for ults to come out, and I mean they were winning those fights. But it's like it's hard to build momentum off of that when you're just waiting for ult to come on. But I
Yeah.
mean they played it well, but Justice aren't like what I would consider to be world beaters. Even though they
Yeah.
beat Defiant, who beat Outlaws, and that's an odd circle of parity that I
You
don't
just
even
don't
want
think
to.
about it too much.
You don't think about the circle of parity that took place. All I know is that Dallas beefed hard against the Outlaws, and I don't know that you can put a whole lot of merit into that match because I don't think that Dallas are going to play that way again. I think that
So
was straight up a one-off, and they fixed their problems, and now they're good moving forward.
so if you were to adjust our predictions going into the season, our power rankings, would you potentially swap Fuel and Outlaws positions at all? Would you,
Coming into the season, well, I mean,
or
we'll.
like from looking forward, do you put Outlaws above the Fuel?
I trust. See, I trust the Fuel to be able to get things together because I mean, it's the same roster basically as last
Yeah.
year, and they're still a good team. I think the Outlaws have more question marks because even though the Fuel beefed hard and they just got 3-0 stomped, I think that was definitely a one-time deal. Whereas the Outlaws have a history of just dropping the Chef
Yeah.
Boyardee all over the floor
Well,
when
and
they should be favored.
in my mind, losing to the Outlaws isn't as bad as losing to the Defiant.
No, I don't think it is. So
And
it's
so I
what
still
is
put
what
Fuel
is
above.
Dallas's schedule for the rest of the kickoff clash?
Let's pull it up.
Because I think I remember they don't have a too terribly difficult schedule if I remember correctly. I know that next week all they're playing is
Okay,
Glads.
they're playing Glads, Defiant, and then they're playing Paris. They're playing Boston.
Well,
They're
Glads
playing.
Defiant Paris that finishes the kickoff clash.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
So
that's sorry.
or
So
yeah, so I
or no, the Boston match
oh
is
in
the last.
Boston. So it's like those are all winnable games for
So Boston,
Dallas.
Paris, Toronto. If they drop any of those three,
Then
then
yeah,
we talk
then
about
we talk. But I think that they're
Glad.
showing against Justice. I think they're fine. I don't
Yeah,
think that Dallas is. I mean, unless if they beef again, if they have another match like they did against the Outlaws, then it'll be like okay, there's something going on here. But because they turned around so quickly and 3-0'd the Justice, I think that they're fine. I mean, they are still trying to figure out kind of what meta they want to run because they did not run the Winston Genji comps against the Justice like we thought they would. Like they,
and
but maybe it's just
after the
because they
first
got.
day of see,
I
after the first day of games, we were like, "Oh man, this is Dallas's world." Like as soon
mhm.
as we saw Winston Gunji as the meta, we were like, "Oh man, Dallas Fuel all the way. They don't drop a single." Like I was thinking, they aren't going to drop any maps this split, and then
They
to
did.
get 3-0'd by Houston, like, oh man. So it's going to be interesting to see how they adjust and what they end up
I
running.
think that they'll be just fine. I think that they'll adjust
Yeah.
fine.
Well, and I think the fact that they were able to play these different comps and make them look good and 3-0 someone with these comps that
Hmm.
they aren't quite as known for in a
Yeah,
meta that's full of stuff that they should predictably be playing, I think it shows that they have an adaptability that a lot of teams don't have.
yeah, exactly. But now moving to another top team that, if we're being honest, didn't look like they should. The Gladiators this week. I don't know. I mean, they went 2-0, but like, did you feel confident about the Glads in their matches?
No, like I mean, they looked okay, but did, was there a single moment that I was like, "Oh man, this is number one team"? No,
No.
like they just didn't have that. They looked okay. They looked like they were playing the game. They were winning. They, yeah, it's just like
It,
I
they
don't know.
they won, but it was like those wins were like, yeah, they went 2-0, but it's like some teams that went 1-1 looked better than they did. And I think a
Yeah,
lot of that had to just do with they had a problem with like just being on the same page, specifically Potapon with Reiner. Potapon
yeah,
had so many moments in both the Boston match and in the New York match where he would stay in too deep for way too long and then he would get punished, whether that he would just get killed or he'd get put super low and they'd have to invest resources to keep him up. So they played very scrappy Overwatch in a bad way. They didn't play as connected and together as all the other top teams like Shock and Rain and Outlaws and Fuel did when they were playing well. And so I think that a large part, it's a little worrisome
Yeah.
that when you drop even though they only drop one map, when you drop a map to Boston and New York, that doesn't look too great if you're supposed to be a top 3 team in the region.
Yeah.
Like, you should not be dropping matches against those teams.
I will say their individual performances looked pretty good. Like, in a bubble, I felt like Reiner
Yeah.
solid. I felt like Funny Astro had some really solid play. I felt like Pataphan, he I don't know how to pronounce things. He was okay. I think he'll adjust, and so it's like I'm not worried. I don't think they'll be a bottom team.
No,
but
yeah,
I
no.
think, but I don't think they're. I think they might fall out of the top 4. I think they'll fall. They have
I
potential
think
to fall below the
the
other.
thing with the Glads is that I think that they would be beat by the other top teams. Like, they would be competitive, but I think that they would still lose out just because, and unless they get their synergy together. If they get the team coordination put together, then I think they're great. Because even though they did look a little shaky, like Shu and Kevster were playing out of their minds, which is to be expected. I mean, Shu is a god. Just like a lot of the other flex supports we saw this week, Shu was popping off, and Kevster was doing wonders on the Genji and the 76 when he was playing. So they have great pieces, and even Reiner looked really good. But Reiner, it's not like he was playing against top tier backlines. So I'll be interested to see how he would perform against backlines that could potentially punish him for the kind of play.
And I think the next couple of weeks will be really telling. They're playing the Glads and the Shock next week.
The Fuel, you mean?
Or the Fuel, sorry. Oh, man.
Los Angeles versus Gladiators out here.
Yeah, and then and then they're playing London, which is a top team.
Of course.
We'll get to that. But then they're also playing Atlanta. So the kickoff clash, if they don't get their crap together, there's a chance they won't even make it to the tournament.
I think, well, I mean, the top 8 teams move on. I'm sure they're fine. They just
think about this: if they
no, don't try and bring the
look at this. So if they lose to the Fuel, which the Fuel, it just kind of depends on which team gets their crap together better by next week.
Okay.
And then they lose to the Shock, who I think's a better team right now.
Okay.
And then they lose to Atlanta.
Okay. Oh my goodness! Wait a minute! What a schedule!
Yeah.
Okay. There is a universe in which they go 0-3 in the next couple weeks.
Yeah. And then the London wins, of course.
So so there's a world in which they go 3-3 in the kickoff clash. Yeah. That's a rough slate of the next 3 matches.
4-3, I think, because they win London. Or wait, no, they played
3-3.
Yeah, 3-3.
If they don't get their stuff together, yeah, they could lose the next 3 matches. I mean, they'd be close. I just think they've got great individual skill. Just as a team, they need to come closer together, because those other teams, like their next 3 games, are against teams that have their stuff together outside of Dallas in the one-off match. So Glads really need to just work on their teamwork, and I think they'll be okay. But currently, they were definitely the weakest looking of the top teams that played this week. But there was also a team that we didn't expect to be a top team, but I mean, I wouldn't say they were a top team this week, but they definitely looked a little surprising, and that's the Florida Mayhem.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the Mayhem this week?
They pleasantly surprised, and when we were first talking about Florida, I knew that they had potential to surprise us, because they had a lot of question marks. And they overperformed in my book. I thought Majed looked awesome. I think Checkmate was really solid.
Now that he got to play DPS and was released from Reinhardt jail.
Yeah. Oh, thank heaven. I think, they outplayed Paris, that's for sure.
They beat on Paris, and I mean, Sir Majed destroyed Paris. I mean, he had 40 bionic grenade kills and 45% sleep dart accuracy, which
Crazy.
is insane for an Overwatch League match. The Mayhem have a lot of good pieces. I thought someone played great on that Winston, and
Who?
on gosh dang it. Onimo looked way better than I thought he would. I didn't expect Onimo to do as well as he did, and Hydron, I mean, the whole team played very solid against the Paris Eternal, and even against Atlanta, they were doing some things. But then I'm gonna need somebody to tell me what was happening on Gibraltar. I'm gonna need somebody to check in on the Mayhem's strategy room, because I'm gonna not I'm not a fan of the Roadhog on Gibraltar. I don't know about you, but
So look, here's the thought is
I'm waiting.
it was anyway, the other maps were really good.
Well, they were good. See, against Atlanta, they were good until they went to Gibraltar. As soon as they went to Gibraltar and just played themselves hard with the someone hog, they then proceeded to just lose push. They lost all momentum that they built up through control and on Eichenwald, because Eichenwald was super close. It went into extra rounds, but then they waltzed out on the Roadhog, and like, theoretically, I could see the thinking behind it. Like, if you're able to get hooks and get the picks that you need, then it could work. But someone just got nothing done. Zero, nothing. He just did nothing. So outside of Gibraltar, which I think you can give them a pass on that, because it's like there's no way they do that again. That was just terrible stuff. So I think that they're showing against Atlanta, and then they're beating on Paris in the second half of that match, has them looking pretty good. I would say that Florida looked like a very good team.
Yeah.
All things considered.
I think they potentially
Potentially
are above Gladiators going into the tournament.
That's standings wise, or like skill level wise?
No, standing wise.
What is their upcoming schedule?
So they play Vancouver, which they should win. Houston, which they should lose, but they might take a map. New York XL, which they should win, I think. And then Washington.
Okay.
So if they beat Vancouver, if they beat XL, and they beat Washington, they're 4-2.
Okay. I guess that is a manageable schedule. Florida they found themselves in a really good spot, and I don't think it's a team that like overperformed in the sense that it's like a one-off, that that's actually not how they play. I mean, I think they played pretty well, and they showed some different comps. I mean, they pulled out the Rhine comp on Eichenwald and played Atlanta close, who I would rate as a very, very good team after this week.
And with as bad as the hog choice was, the fact that they were confident enough to pull it out.
I don't know if confidence is the word I would use for the thought process that went into that team comp.
It was brilliant. It just didn't work out. There is a world where they brought it out and totally dominated. It just isn't our world.
It was not our world.
One thing that was funny about Florida, and this is kind of a side note, I was scrolling through Reddit, and there was this interview that popped up that was someone explaining how he got his name.
I've seen that.
And I watched it, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then the next day, I'm watching the Florida play, and the commentators are talking about
why he chose
about someone, and they were like, oh, I wonder how he even got that name. And I was like, I know.
Yeah, because he thought the word meant like anyone, like anybody,
Yeah,
but then it was like, turns out, no, you're wrong, buddy.
and he didn't want to
And
spend
he
the 10
didn't want
bucks
to,
to
yeah, he
change
didn't want to
his name.
spend the money for the name change. I think that's hilarious. And even his interview with Danny, he had so much energy in the interview. Like, he
Yeah, I
just
love
seems like
someone.
such
I
a
think
fun guy.
yeah, a fun guy. No, he's not a mushroom, but
Gosh dang it.
no, but yeah, and so I think Florida is going to be a really fun team to watch
I
this
think
year.
that
I
they,
think especially because the last, I mean, they've been consistently not one of the top teams.
they are a solid middle of the pack that you can trust to be middle of the pack. But then
Yeah,
there's some other teams fighting in that lower half bracket, specifically everyone else. So I
yeah.
want to start. I want to start talking New York. So, what were your thoughts on the NYXL this weekend?
I think NYXL have an awesome roster that really didn't look all that good.
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, they played the Gladiators in the rain. So it's not like they were playing teams at their skill level. They were playing teams that were miles above them, and they took a map off of the Gladiators. So I
Yeah,
I don't think we can hold it too much against them for losing terribly to like top 5 teams.
but I mean, you have good players. Like, there's no reason why they shouldn't be a top team. With Gangnam Jim Yunbong on support, you have Kellen Tank, you have Yaki Flora. Like, they have the players to be a top team. They just don't have the depth that some of these
Well,
teams
and
have.
they were also coming
But
out on the Yaki Echo, which didn't look terribly great. Like, I would have preferred Yaki to just play Genji or Tracer the whole time. Like, we saw like the Outlaws have success with Echo, but I don't think NYXL
well,
were
and
having
that's
the
the problem
success.
is New York XL. They have the players. It just didn't feel like they were playing the way that they should. They weren't
Yeah.
picking the right characters. They weren't, and so that was the disappointing thing about Excel. And sure, you can say they had a rough schedule, but like, is that really an excuse when you have these players?
Fair
I mean,
enough.
they're in the league.
Yeah, I mean, they're in the league. I just think they had a rough schedule, and it wasn't like a fair showing for them. Unlike some other teams above them, like Florida had a good chance because they played against Paris. Had New York played against Paris, I think we would have been able to see a little bit more from them. But speaking of Paris, how did what were your thoughts on
Thing about
Paris?
Paris is they looked so good. Oh wait, let me rephrase that. They made the Shock look so good. They kind of got stomped. I mean,
They did get very
they
much turbo stomped against the Shock, but then again, so did the other team that played the Shock. I don't
yeah.
think I think of all the teams that bottom teams had to play against, I think any Shock games can be just kind of taken and put into a different place in the universe, and we just look at the Mayhem game. Eternal played decently against the Mayhem. I think that they had a lot of good moments, especially Glister and Naga had some seriously good moments of some pop off moments, and it gave me hope that Paris could actually do some things in the coming weeks.
That being said, though, Florida's not a top team. I mean, they looked good, but they did lose pretty handily to Atlanta. So it's like taking a single map off of a middle tier team isn't something to be super proud of, And
I
and
suppose. I mean, and I
and
guess
so I guess in the world of the bottom few teams, yeah, Paris looked okay, I guess. But like as a bottom team, like I'm not gonna put them above NYXL and I'm not gonna put them above Spitfire.
uh, I suppose I guess that's a good point. But I mean, speaking of Spitfire, who also got hard bodied by the Shock, but we don't talk about that. The Spitfire decided they wanted to be Reinhardt one tricks. I mean, they really discovered their identity. Hottie's Reinhardt, and they just rolled out on only that and kind of bodied the Titans, who
I
we
wanted to
thought were gonna be like in the same tier with them.
see, I wanted to look at what I said last week, and I never got around to it. But I feel like if I didn't say it, I had thought at some point that the Spitfire, if they wanted to if they wanted to win games, they had to do something like this. They had to Chengdu it. They had to find their meta, ignore what everyone else was playing, and just play to their strengths. And that's exactly what they
That's what
did.
they
And
did.
when they did it, they looked great against Vancouver. And I mean, they had another game, but I mean,
They did not look
doesn't
great
matter.
against the Shock.
But it's the Shock, you know?
Although,
Like,
to be fair, I mean, their Eichenwald second point defense against the Shock was pretty good.
but look at it this way. What teams 3-0'd other teams this week? You had San Francisco Shock,
And
you had Houston Outlaws,
and
you had
Atlanta.
Atlanta, and you had Dallas, and you had London. Top 5 teams
Yeah,
right there.
that's a really some really good 3-0 company. But it wasn't just that they 3-0'd a team; it was that they 3-0'd a team that we thought were in the same skill bracket as them.
Yeah.
Which is a really good sign for London. My concern is I don't think this Rhine comp's going to work against good teams.
But it doesn't have to. I feel like the Spitfire, does anyone expect them to make any tournaments? No.
I mean, if
It's
you're
like,
I mean, what's their upcoming schedule? What do they have in the coming weeks?
yeah, let's look at this. Ooh, easy. I'm just kidding. I haven't even. Okay,
Easy.
actually, not that bad. They will win one of their next 4 games.
What are they
Maybe.
playing?
Okay, so I'll start at the sad ones. They have Houston, Glads, and Atlanta in their next 2 weeks, but they're playing Boston.
So they'll go 2-4. Very cool. I don't think that'll be enough to make top 8, but hey.
No, but they'll make a little bit of a splash with that.
A little bit of a splash. 2 wins. Yeah. Hey, at least they'll double their wins from last season in the first stage.
I will say, at this point, and this is another cool thing, so there's a 3-way tie for 5th place in standings, and you have London Spitfire, Florida Mayhem, and Dallas Fuel.
Ah, yes, the 3 teams that are all the same.
Equal to Fuel and Mayhem. Like, not to say I told you so, but
oh, no. I mean,
London
when you bring out the silly comps, it works sometimes, and they completely bodied the team that we thought were in the same skill bracket. But speaking of the team they bodied, oh my goodness, my eyes after seeing that Uprising Titans game. Oh my eyes.
Remember when we were doing our standings and you convinced me to put London beneath Vancouver?
Man, yeah, this match went to 5 maps, but did we want it to go to 5? No. This match was a clown fest of all, like, neither of these teams looked great. Boston and Vancouver.
The Boston-Vancouver match was what we thought the London-Vancouver
We thought London-Vancouver was going to be this, and we thought Boston was going to roll over Titans, but that's not what happened. Instead, what we ended up with was, I don't even know. I mean, Boston, my biggest problem with Boston is that they just subbed in and out so many. They played all 3 of their tank players over the course of the 2 matches.
And that was our biggest worry going into this tournament cycle was, are they going to have a consistent roster? What tanks are going to play? Like,
the answer is no.
They don't know, and it's the exact worst case scenario that we talked about with Boston, and the fact that Vancouver looked so bad against London,
and they had to take
5 map, it just shows how bad Boston is. And I think there's an argument to be made that Boston is right there with Vancouver at the bottom of the table.
It just didn't look great. And I mean, Vancouver looked horrible against London's rush comps. And then when they were playing the meta stuff, they looked so average to below average. Neither of these teams showed any. I mean, yeah, Boston took a map off of Glads, but so did New York. And I mean, everyone's just going to take maps off of Glads. But the fact that Vancouver needed to take 5, and they also C9'd the last map as well. This match just hurt. It hurt to watch, and neither of these teams, is there any hope for either of these teams? I don't think so. I think there's hope for Boston if they figure out their roster. If they can figure out who they want to run when, I think they could start bringing it to a team like London, and they might be able to take it to Paris and NYXL. Maybe, probably not. But they're still going to get bodied by the top teams.
It'll be interesting to see how their match against London goes. I'm
Yeah,
interested.
I just they need to figure out their roster because all three of their tanks played. They subbed in MCD once for Crimzo for who knows what reason, and then Victoria came in and out for Striker, but like they have the same hero pool. I guess Victoria's the better sniper, but it just this team didn't have any consistency with their roster. I mean, they would sub in like 3 players every other map, and it would just be really weird.
Yeah. Well, and they have like this huge amount of players, but the champion pool isn't as deep as it should be in that case. Like they would switch out characters, but I mean players,
Players
but
but
they
play the
play the same
same
character,
heroes. Yeah, I
and
I
it's like,
don't know what Boston will look like moving forward, but Vancouver at the very least, how Vancouver played, I think that's just the Vancouver we're gonna get, and that's not very
yeah,
inspiring. So I don't really know what to say about those two in particular, because at least London showed that they have a strat that works, and Paris and New York showed signs of life in their losses. Like they weren't dead in the water. They at least showed
yeah,
some. But like Vancouver and Boston, I don't even. Those
yeah,
two just worry the heck out of me. So we'll just let them. We'll let them sit in their bottom bits. But in order to do that, I think we need to do totally timely power rankings after the first week because we totally know what happened this week and we can totally rank all these teams, right? Right?
oh yeah,
Surely.
easily,
See,
easily.
I
So
think I think we start with the APAC power rankings. I think we move these around a little bit after 0 matches.
yeah, I think Chengdu moves their way all the way above Shanghai because
all the way one spot above Shanghai, a
because
n singular place.
because if I learned anything from this week, it's that top teams disappoint.
Fair enough. So currently, when we look at the power rankings that we've got, uh, is when I Glads are not number one. I don't know what we were smoking a little bit.
Yeah,
If I'm looking at number one, I part of me wants to say shock because they were so dominant, but they played bottom feeders. So
yeah,
I don't trust them as much, but I think the Rain, I think Atlanta would be the number one team because they
yeah.
beat
It's got
Florida,
to
and
be
Florida
either.
Florida was better competition than Paris or Boston or Boston for shock.
I
Not
think it's going
Boston.
to be either shock or the rain. We'll have to see how this next week goes for me to be
I
confident
think
either.
I think it's at least after this week's showing because Rain played. Yeah, they beat NYXL, which doesn't really count, but they beat Florida, and I think because Florida is a mid-table team versus Paris and the Spitfire for Shock, I think Shock needs to show a little bit more to say that
Yeah,
they're top. So I think Atlanta 1, Shock 2 is good, and I think we're probably safe to put Titans dead last, right?
yeah.
Okay,
I
so
think
we have our bookend set, and now we have this chaos in the middle. So I have no idea what to do with slots 3 through 7
I would
because
go. I
Glads
still
did go
think
2-0, but Glads look shaky, so I don't feel comfortable putting them above Fuel or even the Outlaws.
no. So I would go Fuel Outlaws Glads.
Fuel Outlaws Glads. Okay.
Yep.
I think I can agree with that. And then Glads.
And then
I would put Toronto underneath the Glads.
I could see that. Yeah,
I would go Toronto Justice. Uh yeah,
I
I'd
would
go.
put.
Would
You'd
you put
put
Florida above
Justice over
Justice?
Florida. I think I'd put Florida over Justice.
Uh I mean, did they didn't play any comparative
Uh,
strength teams
who
though.
else did Justice play? They
Justice
got
played. They got
recent.
bodied by Fuel and then beat Defiant. But Defiant beat Outlaws. But I think Defiant Justice got lucky because I don't think the Defiant that Justice played was the same Defiant that played the Outlaws. And like
Well, it's
Florida,
gotta be Florida Justice or Justice Florida. I think those two. It's like either way, not enough information. But
I
I would put Florida.
above.
You'd
I
put
you know what?
Justice.
I want to put Florida. Let's put Florida above
Let's put
Justice.
Florida.
Let's put Florida above Justice. I would say I would put New York Paris as the next two.
I'd put New York London.
New York London. You think London are better than Paris?
I think London are better than Paris.
See, I feel
right
like if London and Paris played each other, Paris would just opt into the Reinhardt duel.
and I think Spitfire would win because they've been playing
Yeah,
it.
but I mean, you don't think that Glister would be able to would like that Glister and Naga would be able to do enough to prevent Spitfire from getting a lot done?
I think it would be close.
So, but we both agree that New York is under justice, though,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That New
Let's
York
put
is the top of that bottom five.
yeah. New York is better than the other 5.
Okay, well so Titans is dead last. I would put Boston in 12th, right? Like surely there's no
Yeah.
way they're better than Paris or London. No way.
No, and then you have Europe Watch.
Europe
Right.
Watch and then New York. So Europe Watch, New England, and then you have Florida. And I think Washington and Florida are like the same rank, and I think
Yeah.
Toronto edges them slightly out. And yeah, Glads went 2-0, but man, do I feel way better about Outlaws and Fuel than I do about Glads. Like,
Yeah.
I would need to see Glads play somebody like Mayhem or Defiant. Because if the Gladiators played Mayhem or Defiant, or even Justice, I think we'd get a really good idea of what their actual power level is. Because they played Boston and New York, like, come on. And they dropped maps to them, too. So, nope, I don't think that they can go any higher than 5th right now.
Yeah.
But this bottom 3 or 4 is just a mess.
It's rough.
It's such a mess. But
except London is going to emerge out of it.
You think London? I mean, so currently, if the standings were based on our power rankings, it's top 8, right? So Justice and up.
Yeah, I could see that.
I could see that, and I mean, I could also see Justice slipping because they're the Justice and have a history of just forgetting how to play the video game. But I mean, if any of those bottom teams were to jump up, it would be New York, Paris, or London. And if London did it, it would just be because they just beat people with the Rhine comp. But they aren't playing bad teams in the coming weeks. Yeah, they're playing Boston, but I don't think 2 and 4 is enough for top 8. There's no way. There's no way.
Speaking of upcoming weeks, you ready to make some predictions?
Some predictions. So we've got some matches that are okay. So we've picked 4 of the 13 matches for next week to do Preds, and half of them have the potential to just be like eye bleach potentially, and then the other 2 are actual probably certified bangers. So we're gonna start with the potential eye bleach matches. So the first one is NYXL Titans. Realistically, is there any way the Titans win this match?
Yeah. So what's gonna happen? And this is how it's going to happen. New York, Yaki is going to have a nosebleed that's so bad it keeps him out of playing the game.
So they play 4v5?
So Vulcan plays DPS. And so you have Vulcan Flora on the DPS line. And then they get totally diffed by Shockwave Psycho.
No, NYXL's taking that one, surely, right? Like we're in agreement there.
NYXL.
I think Titans could take a map off them. I don't think it'll be a 3-0.
I think it's either a 3-1 or a 3-2.
I don't think it'll go to map 5. I think Titans will just boom themselves. I think it'll be a 3-1 though. I think New York will choke somewhere along the way. But there's no the Titans. Oh no. I don't have a whole lot of faith in this team doing anything. And when you lose to Boston, who is probably the next closest team to you, like they're
Well, and their upcoming matches. So outside of New York, they're playing Florida, Atlanta, San Francisco, Glads, and Houston.
They play.
Games?
They play San Francisco. Oh my goodness! If you guys, oh my goodness! If we want to see a stomping of epic proportions, there's your stomp.
The same week they play Atlanta and San Francisco.
Oh, that's a great. Yeah, no, the Titans. I feel so sad for this team. NYXL are gonna beat them, and it's just gonna be sad. But the next match I think is a little more interesting. So Boston Uprising, London Spitfire, right next to each other in the standings. I'm on the EU train. Are you?
Yeah. I think so. The problem with Boston is like I feel like if any team in the bottom half should be able to handle Spitfire, it should be Boston because they have the depth that they can have people that are just focusing on playing characters that counter the Ryan comp. But is Boston going to do that?
No, there's no way.
There's no way they prep for the London match.
I mean, if London
properly.
steamroll Vancouver 3-0, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be able to steamroll Boston, who barely beat Vancouver.
Yeah. That being said, if teams haven't been scrimming with London and teams didn't expect London to come out with the Rhine, there's a chance that because Boston now knows, if they didn't know before,
they can't even figure out their own roster. You think they're going to be able to figure out Rhine comps?
Like I said, I'm on the Spitfire wagon.
Yeah, I'm on the Spitfire. I'm on the airplane.
But there is a chance that Uprising get their crap together and
make it a 3-2 instead of a 3-1.
Yeah, or potentially win. You know, you never know.
I think this is definitely going to be the closer of these two bottom half matches. But I think unless Uprising has gotten their crap together, Spitfire's probably just going to roll them like they did Vancouver.
But I think it'll be a fun game to watch.
It'll be a fun game to watch.
That's the thing. Spitfire this year, as long as they're running this kind of comp, I think they'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, they'll be fun to watch, but they'll definitely take that match. But now that we've got potential eye bleach out of the way, now we get to the certified bangers of the week.
Yeah.
So we're gonna start with Dallas Fuel versus Los Angeles Gladiators. I'm taking the Fuel in this matchup. What say ye?
Just because it'll make me look so much better next week if this happens. Gladiators.
Okay, I'm going with the Fuel because I think that their week one was just it wasn't really the Dallas Fuel, and they looked better against Washington, and I just don't trust the Gladiators after.
Gladiators, their biggest issue this week was communication.
It was team organization.
And I think that they have potential to get that together.
Yeah, but I mean, I look at the Dallas. When I place these rosters next to each other, Dallas is just better on paper.
In theory, but they aren't even playing the comps that they should be good at. Like, they aren't looking good on the comps that they should look good at.
I just don't trust the Glads. I just don't. When you drop a map to Boston and you're supposed to be a top 5 team, like, that doesn't look very good.
Yeah, but dropping a map, it's whatever, you know?
So we're split in the middle. I think it'll be a 5-mapper, though, regardless of which way it goes.
I think it could be.
This should be a 5-map, just a super good series. So
we thought that about the Outlaws Fuel game.
It's true. Fuel if Fuel come out and just faceplant again, I'm gonna lose. I'm just gonna never play them again.
So it's gonna be a 3-0 Gladiators win, and yeah.
No, it'll be a 3-2.
When that's the case, I'm gonna come with purple face paint and
paint, shields up. Okay. Now then, the last match that we're pretting. This should also be another really good match. Houston Outlaws versus San Francisco Shock. What's your take on this match?
How far into the week is this?
This is Friday. This is the second match Friday, so it's early on in the week. It's the 2:30. Okay. It's the 1:30 Pacific time match on Friday.
Yeah. Okay, so with that being the case, I think first map goes to Houston.
You're gonna break it down for us before you tell me your prediction.
Oh, the Shock lose the first map.
They lose Shock lost control. We know.
Shock lost control. It was 2-0. They get 2-0'd on control.
Oh, a 2-0 on control. Okay.
Yeah, but then
Proper goes sicko mode.
Reverse sweep, and it's they win 3-1.
I don't think that's. I think your
so
definition. I was like, I think your definition of reverse sweep needs some help. So you think it's 3-1 Shock?
No. So it's a 3-1 Shock. They lose the first map and then they win the next.
Okay, very interesting. Well, I'm snuffing the hopium. I'm on the Outlaws train. I think this is a 5-map.
Side question: what state are you from?
I don't think I need to divulge that information. I don't think I need to say there's no bias here. No, but in all seriousness, I think this will be a good match regardless.
Yeah.
But what worries me is that the Defiant showed that there are weaknesses in the Outlaws comp, but I would trust Junkbuck and Jake to work on that. And because if they come into the shock match and just one trick Dante Doomfist, no, it's over. Proper. I mean, if Finale's Tracer can help shut down Dante's Doomfist, Proper's Tracer is gonna run circles around Dante's Doomfist.
Well, and Jake is aware. Like, I don't know if you saw, but he even tweeted.
Yeah, he tweeted that
after that match,
they're
and he
gonna
was like,
make some
"Hey, that was
work.
my bad.
So
Didn't properly."
I'm just gonna pred the Outlaw because there's gonna be an upset next week. There's gonna be an upset next week, and I feel like this could be the upset.
And do you know what that upset's gonna be?
Oh, no.
All the Houston fans that got their hopes up.
We
They're
already
gonna
had the hopes. The hopes of the Houston fans were already dashed when they lost to
Yeah,
Toronto.
that's true.
So it's not like we look like the Outlaws look good. I think it'll be a close match, at least hopefully. But here, what if we're actually in the Shadow Realm and the Outlaws 3-0 the Shock? What if, hypothetically?
Okay, Houston fan.
I mean, they 3-0 Dallas. I mean, anything's possible. And it's not like the Shock played very good teams last week.
The Shock is the only team. Yeah, they're the only team that hasn't lost a single map.
No, the Outlaws have Junkbuck. He'll have Krusty's number.
Haven't dropped a single map.
Whatever. So those are the Preds. So now we're gonna end the week on the play of the week, and I don't think there can be any other play here. I think it has to be the
totally legal
the illegal maneuver over Florida Mayhem doing the tech over the
They just wanted to
Circuit
show
Royal.
They just wanted to show that they could win the map twice.
They actually won 4-1 against Paris Eternal, winning Circuit Royal twice. It was so funny because they just come out with this creativity. And I was watching the Avast Companion stream, and they had DPay on, and as soon as Mayhem did this, DPay immediately was like, "Wait a minute, isn't that illegal?" But
yeah, and you messaged me, and I was like, "Well, they're still going."
What was even funnier was Gunba tweeted saying that they were not aware of the rule that they broke, that they weren't allowed to use exploits, which bull crap. There's no way they didn't know. Come on. But what was so funny was all the copy pasta that came out of it. Mitch retweeted this one. My 10-month-old was watching this match when Mayhem abused that exploit. She turned to me and said, "Daddy, why does the Overwatch League let teams use such an exploitative strategy?" I had tears in my eyes as I had to explain to her the realities of life. Thank God for the refs. It was so funny. But what was even funnier was during the 30-minute break. I swear it was 30 minutes just to reset the map. The Mayhem tweeted that if this tweet gets 1,000 likes, we'll do it again. And then they came out on the second attack and put the Maywall and the Sim TP up, but didn't use it. But that play alone makes me so I think the Mayhem are gonna be a fun
they're gonna
team.
be fun to watch. Their interviews were fun. They seem like a cool team. If you want a solid middle tier team to get your hopes up for, only to be dashed later in the year,
we gotta get on the Goomba, the Gunba Goop. Just get on it. Get on the Gunba Goop train. Just huff it. Huff the copium. I think that they'll be just a fun team to pull. I mean, though it didn't work, who else played Roadhog? Even though it didn't work, I just love the Roadhog. I think the Mayhem are gonna be such a fun team this season. And they gave me so much hope. They pulled out a pro gamer move that got called back and then still won the map afterwards. This will be a fun team. But that is week 1 in a nutshell. We had some crazy matches. We had teams just doing their thing, namely the Houston Outlaws, but we had some upsets in the form of Dallas forgetting how to play the video game and Proper just showing he is a god. Along with every Ana player in the league, it seems like.
Yeah.
But I'm just so happy that the Overwatch League is back. It's been too long. We've been in a winter was here, but now here we are. Spring has come. The waters of just nourishment. We're gonna all be revitalized by 6 months of Overwatch that goes until at least November. So
Yeah.
strap in. Who knows what's gonna happen?
And side note, if you are still listening to us, thank you. We really
We
appreciate
really
it.
do appreciate
Go ahead
listening to
and
these.
give this video, just smash that like
I
button,
hate you so much.
and feel free to comment. Subscribe if you want. You know, it's whatever. Subscribe.
Oh no.
And then also, if you haven't had these yet, they make Girl Scout Thin Mint pretzels, not a sponsor.
You're over here just
but,
plugging the food. Oh
but
my goodness.
seriously, the
That's
world
not
is
your
a
mom's
happier
cooking.
place.
We're only sponsored by your mom's cooking. Put that away. Put it away. Get it out of my sight. I don't know what's happening. We'll catch all of you guys next week after week 2.
Every week.
Hope you have a wonderful weekend of matches ahead of you, just like we do. We hope that you enjoy it, and we'll see you all next week.